Yeah, I tell everyone I meet in my life about AMS. Everywhere I go, I'm like, oh my gosh, I went to this great school. Anyone I meet who's like my age and is interested in teaching, I'm like, oh, you're interested in teaching? How about middle school? If you're interested in a private school, there's this great school in the woods. It's wonderful. You should go teach there. And anyone I know with my age student kids, I'm always like, so I know it's weird. I know it's scary to think of sending your 12-year-old off to a boarding school, but there's this brilliant school that I went to, and I loved it, and it was the greatest experience of my life.
Well, it's known as cutting edge because right now one of the greatest interests among Montessori teachers is extending the experience into the middle school years. And Montessori had a particular vision for children of all ages, which was to provide them with the education that was developmentally appropriate for them. In the middle school years, there's very little in our educational system that does that. So Montessori's vision for those middle school years was children are growing and expanding physically, intellectually, imaginatively, emotionally, and it's a time of their life when they need a large arena in which to express themselves and explore themselves. So her ideal was a farm school where children could have meaningful work, grow things that would have a market in the world, and actually feel themselves to be moving into adulthood.
I feel like I'm learning in some ways more what I need for life from AMS than from a public school. Because AMS, it teaches academics too, but it teaches more than academics, which is pretty much all a public school teaches. It teaches how to live in a community, a close, tight community. It teaches, if you've never had siblings, how to deal with siblings or how to have a roommate and how to work out boundaries. It cultures your interest. It, gives you a natural playground. It teaches you gardening. It teaches you, just all these things that you can't get from a normal public school or private school.
And learning math in particular, so many students say, why am I learning this? This doesn't matter. This isn't important. But when you start looking at things in the context of the world, you start actually maybe enjoying math and loving math. And certainly when you get into the real world, questions don't come at you simply, like in a math textbook or in any textbook. They're not simple. They've got all these little weird technicalities and things that you have to work out. And at AMS, especially with things like field trips, where you're working out all the fine details, you get experience in how to, this is a scenario in the real world, and then breaking that down and saying, these are the problems that I have, and breaking them into steps so that you can solve each of those problems individually instead of already having, the packaged problem to solve.
What I think works so well with this age group is that although the academics are part of everyday experience here, they are a very integrated part, and I think that that's really the only way that you get anything into this age group's brain. They're so social, they're so into the experience of these changing bodies and this growing mind, and it has to be integrated, otherwise it just flies away.
When these kids go to take like the SAT or their end of grade test, and there's going to be a question about simple machines, most kids, they learn about simple machines, they're sitting in a classroom. When I went to AMS, I learned about simple machines by moving logs in the woods. And now I remember about simple machines because I learned by doing it.
Man, I really liked this project because it was just a chance to, first of all, this class was it was a class that you could actually be counted in high school as a civics class. I got really interested in researching just about the country. I learned a lot more about laws that have put in place, laws that have expired, different presidents we've had, and it's really been interesting to learn something that actually really relates to the country that I live in, and just to research so much stuff that, if we were actually president, what we could do, what we could change, what we could make better. It was a real cool project because we just learned so much about everything that was real.
The student to staff ratio is obviously a huge benefit, and because of that, the teachers can actually focus on each student independently and help them learn about their own learning styles. And so one of the greatest things I learned from AMS was how I, as an individual, learn. And so then when I got to high school and then again in college, I could really understand what I needed to do to study.
Coming from teaching public schools, I really find AMS liberating because the students interact much more, and we have smaller classes, which allows me to interact with students much more. And we can have a better relationship both as people, as teacher to student, and we can have a better relationship with the material. To create lifelong learners, I think what we need to do first of all is make sure the kids are interested in learning. And in order to be interested in it, they have to have a good time doing it, and they also have to learn. And one of the things that really empowers this school is that we really try to engage students' interests and guide that in a constructive way that will then facilitate further interest in something else and hopefully open them up to other avenues of learning.
One of the problems that we've been working on this past week is looking at some equations that actually solve how long your bones are if you know how tall you are. And one of the students back here, a lot of the students drew themselves, traced themselves on paper, and then took the inches. This girl, Mihaela, was 5 feet 5 inches tall, converted that to centimeters, and came up with she's 163 centimeters tall. So from that, we used some equations that forensic scientists developed, and you can figure out how long your tibia, your femur, your radius, and your humerus bones are by knowing how tall you are. Just doing the artistic, part of it was really fun for a lot of them and took them out of that fear of I don't know how into I can display how I do my work.
What I really have been impressed with is that she was a person that came here without a love of math at all. She didn't think she could do math. She didn't like math. I have seen a huge change in that. She now feels as though she can do math. She has a better attitude about it. I think she sees it more as a game, and it was so helpful to her to not have this punitive, you're not able to do this, therefore you fail. Basically, she was able to go back and work through the problems until she understood them. And now she has this tremendous base for math that I know she wouldn't have gotten in the public school. She wasn't getting in the public school. We had to use tutors just so that she could keep up.
In a nutshell, my philosophy of teaching language arts is that kids need to write. The more they write, the easier it is for them to do it, and the more they understand how it works at an intuitive level. And the same thing with reading. They need to read as much as they can, and the more they read, the better they get. November is National Novel Writing Month, and our students are getting very interested in this. This is something that I did last year, and the attempt is to write 50,000 words during the month of November, starting with a fresh piece of fiction, something that you have not worked on before, and produce a novel in a single month. And it's worked. A lot of students want to take this on. They have begun making plans, they've begun outlining characters and plot, and many students are really excited. They come up to me and they tell me, the story that they're going to write, or, oh, this character, he's going to do this, or he's going to come after, so-and-so. And everybody who's interested, we're going to get together and start writing, and we're going to have writing parties, and we're going to sit together for as long as we can stand it and write and write and write, all of us aiming for our personal goal.
This particular age, there's not another one like it. And I taught 6th grade for a little while, so I know what that change is about. But most of the really stark personal decisions are made during this period in the kids growing up, during that 7th, 8th, 9th grade. They go from they're still a little bit of a child in 7th grade, but they're thinking about working towards it, adulthood. And then by the time they're 9th grade, they really have made a lot of the choices that they're going to be, but at this time, things like how they're going to interact with the opposite sex, is in schools they're thought about, sex and physical relationships is the only thing, that's what you go for, whereas here they learn they can actually have friends who are the opposite sex, which is, ideal. they don't have the pressures of, of television constantly telling them that you need to buy this, you need to wear this, you need to have this, all those things they're sort of sheltered from, and they can allow the other parts of the world to enter in and become a part of them.
Well, electives are just like side classes about your interests, really, that you normally wouldn't get in school or in a normal school. Like there was a ethics class, or an ethics elective, which basically pushed your boundaries, studied ethics. There was a jewelry elective, where you learned to make jewelry. There was the belly dance elective. There was a hip hop dance elective. There was a soap and cheese making elective even.
There's so much art, I feel, in this school compared to a regular public school. They get a chance to experience many venues of creativity. For instance, my oldest son is a dancer, professional dancer. He's a modern dancer. He dances with Pilobolus. And he would never have been there if it were not for Arthur Morgan. He bumped into dance here. And here he had the freedom of exploring that and expressing that part of himself without fearing that he was going to be stigmatized or teased by the rest of the community. There is a great deal of music. The day starts with singing, and so the kids are really exposed to music. There's metalworking, glass blowing, pottery. There's always some creative activity that the kids are involved in, all kinds of electives, and even presentations for the regular schoolwork often entails a great deal of creativity. And they pull all of these influences that they have around in the community and put it forth in their particular project, whether it be a school project or an art project or something they want to do for the house, or gifts that they give each other, say around the holidays. It's just this constant creativity.
We did a Saturday night activity, and Jeff came in with a bunch of, computers and video cameras, and we did claymation, which was really cool. It was a great opportunity. He had the resource of, App State and those cameras and computers and technology, and learned a lot about, you see all these movies that are done with claymation, and you don't realize how hard it is until you actually try it yourself and do some short clips of stuff.
At AMS, we don't have formal testing. We don't give grades, but we do extensive written evaluations, and we have academic open houses at the end of the 6-week unit that are a chance for kids to be held accountable for the work that they've learned over the course of 6 weeks. And at these open houses, we invite community members, we invite their parents, we might invite other school groups to come out, so that they're really showing the rest of the world what they've learned over the past 6 weeks, not just their teachers.
Final preparations here?
Yep.
What you got going?
This is a motor. I'm just making sure that it works the way it's supposed to. Then here's a single coil motor.
Are they working?
Yeah, they're both working.
Tell me how it works.
Well, as it turns, the brushes there switch the way that it is, the polarity of the magnet. So as it switches, it pushes away from the magnet on the bottom.
Now, did you make this yourself?
Yeah.
Was it difficult to get it just right?
Yeah, I tried making this bottom magnet out of electromagnet. It didn't work. And then I switched it to a permanent magnet. It works really good.
I'm not aware of so many things that she does here, but I wasn't aware that she was the only student in the Camp Silo Garden internship. And she walked a whole group of people. It was mostly adults, staff, and parents. She walked us all through the garden, step by step, and here's what we planted here, and here's why we planted this, and here's where the food goes, and here's who buys it, and here's how it's processed. And she knew the whole thing. It wasn't just plant this seed and watch something grow. It was plant the seed, watch it grow, know who buys it, know how it's cooked, know where it goes. She had a sense of her context.
We've been weeding and planting and transplanting and making more beds out there. We put manure on the beds and then we plant some stuff in it. And some of these I've planted. Let's see, this one I planted. This is called Love Lies Bleeding. It's going to be really cool and it grows up.
I think when I see this, what I see is all of the frustration and struggle that came before it, and now it's just sort of erupting into a project that Mary's like into, like as opposed to like struggling against and fighting against and doing because she has to. Like now it's something that's hers and it looks like her.
Why'd you choose a dandelion?
Well, I don't know. She told me to make something 3D, and I was standing there, and they're all over the place right now. So I was like, well, that'd be pretty cool looking. I might eventually at the open house have some like hangings that they're blowing, like hanging from fishing line or something. That's how I might display it.
Does it relate to the story at all?
Well, kind of. The story is kind of about like people and how they treat you, and like how you got to get over some things, you know, and, like. Just let them blow away in the wind, I guess. We have 3 days, 6 days, and then we have a 5-day service trip and an 18-day field trip. Wow, I have a lot of stories from that. And an 8-day biking, hiking, or canoe trip.
I think the important thing about being here in this natural environment is that you have to deal with it. It's just part of the everyday experience. They might be on a hike and the weather may not cooperate. You know, it may be very, very hot, but you have a certain amount of days in which you have to complete your hike, and so you move on. I think that we forget that we are organisms who live on this planet often.
She's just gotten a broader experience for what it means to be contributing to a household. The new quality in her that's different is that she's willing to contribute in terms of picking up her dishes or washing her own clothes.